What is going on? I want to welcome you from AFCOR for today, Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. I am Sean Murphy, and today we got to talk about the NBA trade deadline because the NBA doesn't stop, man. It's 24/7, and right now it is the Christmas season if you're an NBA fan because, oh my goodness, the phones are ringing. All the general managers are scrambling. Every single team is trying to figure out what exactly their plan is going into Thursday's trade deadline. And the Detroit Pistons are seemingly a team that hold a lot of interesting chips and cards that they're bringing to the table, and a lot of things that people want to walk away with. Things like bojan bogdanovic, players like Alec Burks, players like Sadiq Bey. And that's the interesting thing, is what will Detroit do? And the even more fascinating part of about the NBA trade deadline is the reports and things that begin to come out. Like for one, I saw Mike Conley be linked to the Clippers and the Lakers this morning. I saw Kyle Lowry also being linked to the Clippers as well. And now there's a report from Keith Smith about Grant Williams, a player that we've talked a lot about being a potential player that the Pistons could pursue in free agency. A guy who is a really good three-point shooter. I know he's been struggling a little bit more this year. A guy who's really good on the defensive end. And the report says Grant wants a lot of money. We heard he thinks he's got 18 to 20 million waiting for him in free agency. He wants to play more, probably start. Now, listen, I don't know if Detroit's going to pay him 18 to 20 million dollars a year. I don't know if that's actually what his market would be. However, if Troy Weaver wanted to go get a potential chip that would be available in free agency, the Boston Celtics have someone available. And if you're the Pistons, it's not like you don't have pieces that they wouldn't be interested in return. I'm sure the Boston Celtics wouldn't be opposed to having a guy like Alec Burks or bojan bogdanovic. And quite frankly, I'm sure they'd be interested in Sadiq Bey as well. Now, whether or not Troy Weaver would want to pull the trigger and give up any of those assets in return for Grant Williams, when they could potentially try and go get him in free agency instead, and maybe see if you can put those pieces around Grant Williams, that's a whole other conversation. However, that just shows you what types of developments can come at the deadline. I mean, for Christ's sakes, last Friday, we saw Kyrie Irving just out of the blue go like, hey, so I want out. And then by Sunday, he's in Dallas. That's just how quickly things can go now. And the beautiful thing for it is, for the Pistons, they're kind of in this luxurious spot where they have Cade Cunningham on the sidelines, getting healthier. He's going to be fully ready to go next season. They have Jaden Ivey, who, by the way, has been playing really well ever since he's been given the sole point guard responsibility of leading that first unit of trying to play that Cade-esque role. I was blown away with the fact that last night, Jaden Ivey, 5 assists, 1 turnover against the Boston Celtics. The fact that this kid is getting better and being more and more mature each and every night with taking care of the ball, especially, after the team had an abysmal performance of all those turnovers, the other night when they returned from Dallas, actually, when they were on their road trip. But having said all that, it's interesting that the player that's reportedly the most available, this has been reported by James this has been reported by James Edwards III, and this has also just been, seconded by the fact there's been a lot of reports that there are teams seemingly interested in Sadiq Bey. That Sadiq Bey is apparently the most gettable player in theory for the Detroit Pistons. And at first you kind of pause and you go, well, wait a minute. Sadiq Bey was a key member of our team. He's a foundational member of Troy Weaver's core four. He was someone that he brought in, got a lot of value, and, has been one of our stable pieces since day one. On both ends of the court, he's kind of just been someone who's always just been available. Last year, he was the only guy on our team that played every single game. And sure, there were a couple times, there were a couple games he missed this year for the first time due to injury. But, Sadiq, even though he struggled to start the season, he's been starting to pick it up a little bit more. And it's the question of, do you want to pay Sadiq in addition to all the other players that you're going to have to pay? Because if you're Detroit, you have to look at it realistically now. You have Jaden Ivey, who's going to have to have an extension coming up at some point. You have Cade Cunningham, who's going to have an extension coming up at some point. You have Jalen Duren, who, if he keeps going, he's going to have an extension coming up at some point. And then also you have to consider Isaiah Stewart. He's going to have to be paid something. Killian Hayes, if you want to keep him around and have him as a backup point guard, you're going to have to sign him to some form of extension as well. Probably probably the most affordable and team-friendly of the bunch, but still, you're going to have to pay him nonetheless. And then there's the possibility of a Victor Wembanyama or a Scoot Henderson or whoever's available in this draft lottery, and they're going to have to get paid too. And that's the, it's kind of the tricky part of drafting really well, is that you got to pay some of these guys, and at a certain point, you got to have to make a decision. So it's the interesting thing. If you are Troy Weaver, do you feel the pressure or the need, or do you get these offers from teams leading up to the deadline? Certain teams, like maybe the Lakers, who are, inherently more desperate and want to maybe get over the hump, especially after the Mavericks went out and made the move that they did to go get Kyrie Irving. I mean, LeBron seemingly believes that, if this team's healthy, that they can make a run as is. And I'm sure he believes that they add another piece, that would make them even better. But the reality of it is that they're going to have to definitely do something if they want to make them serious contenders. And I think, it would have to take a Bojan Bogdanovic type piece for them to get better. And, and for Detroit, they saw with Kyrie Irving that they were willing to give up those picks. They would have to do they would have to give up some picks to Detroit as well. And there would have to be very limited to no protections on those picks. I mean, Troy Weaver pretty much said you need to get an unprotected first at the very least in return for Bojan Bogdanovic. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think Bojan's getting traded. I think, I do think that there will be a lot of offers coming Troy Weaver's way. But at the same time, you have to consider the fact that he's going to have value as well in the summer. Like the Smith, that this is the highest value that he's ever going to be at. I still believe that after this season, teams would be very interested in his services then as well. So I don't think there's a lot of pressure for Troy Weaver to have to make a decision over the next couple of days. But at the same time, if there are players like Grant Williams who seemingly are becoming available, if there are more players who voice that they're disgruntled and that they want changes, if there are players like Jared Vanderbilt throughout the league who are seemingly becoming available, like for Troy Weaver, like if you're like, oh, this is a place where we can make improvements now, that's something you have to consider. And that's part of where your future salary cap comes into place as well. Like, do you want to take on long-term contracts? Do you want to maybe get guys that you couldn't normally get in free agency? Like, is this a market where you maybe try to buy? Is this a market where you really try to sell? Like, I think those are the interesting things that are going to have to ponder. Like, in my opinion, I know that we only have 14 wins on the season, and it's difficult to look, at how things have gone. And some of the nights where we've given up like 49 points in a quarter, or where, they've given up multiple 30-point quarters in a night. Like, it's difficult to look at that and say, well, things are going in the right direction. But at the same time, Cade Cunningham will be fully available next season. There will be a ton of salary cap space to work with. Like, if this team makes, incremental improvements on top of what they're going to be able to make in the offseason, they're going to be just fine. And so I'm really excited to see what these next couple of days bring. And I'm just excited at the very least, just because of the conversations that will come of it, the clarity that will come of it, and also just as a basketball fan, just to see what the general league does. Because we're seeing clearly that a lot of teams want to push their chips in the middle of the table, and a lot of teams want to make sure that other teams don't get certain assets like OG Anunoby, like Fred VanVleet. Like, I'm just personally fascinated to see how all of that goes down. And I know people were, looking at everything that was happening at Brooklyn, and it was like, oh, well, it's time for Detroit to bring in Kevin Durant. Do not mortgage your future for that, please. I mean, I love Kevin Durant as much as the next guy. I would love as much as anybody to have a top 5 player in the NBA on my team right now. But, guys, help is on the way. Buckets are on the way. But with that, I want to know what your thoughts are at the trade deadline so far. What you think Troy Weaver's big move should be at the trade deadline. Are there players you think we should be targeting before Thursday's deadline? Let me know in the comment section down below. But also, be sure you're subscribing to the channel and being tuned in for all the content and coverage that we're going to be having surrounding the trade deadline, as well as the NBA draft, the lottery, free agency, so much more. We're going to be covering it. We're going to be giving as much content, if not more, than any other channel you're going to find on this platform. So be sure you click that subscribe button. But with that, folks, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe. Catch morning with the Murphs Monday, Wednesday, Friday as well.